I lived the perfect marriage until the FBI called. My wife didn't exist. The truth: she was a professional con artist with 8 identities, who destroyed my entire life to steal $600,000. My name is Michael, and for 3 years I lived what I thought was the greatest love story ever told. I was married to a woman who seemed too perfect to be real, who loved me with an intensity that made me feel like the luckiest man alive. I didn't know was that she literally was too perfect to be real, that our entire relationship was an elaborate con designed to destroy my life in ways I never could have imagined. It started in a coffee shop in downtown Chicago on a rainy Thursday morning in October. I was running late for a client meeting, frantically trying to balance my laptop bag, umbrella, and a hot coffee when I collided with the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Coffee went everywhere, my papers scattered across the floor, and I stood there like an idiot, apologizing profusely while she laughed and helped me gather my things. "I'm so sorry," I kept saying, but she just smiled and said, "Don't worry about it. I needed a reason to buy a new outfit anyway." Her name was Isabella Martinez, and she was unlike anyone I'd ever met. She was stunning, with dark hair and green, eyes that seemed to see right through me, but it was her personality that really captured me. She was funny, intelligent, spontaneous, and had this way of making me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world when she looked at me. We talked for 20 minutes while cleaning up the coffee mess, and by the time we were done, I knew I had to see her again. I asked for her number with more confidence than I'd ever felt asking out a woman. And when she said yes, I felt like I'd won the lottery. I was 31 years old, a successful software engineer who had built a tech consulting firm that was doing well enough to afford me a comfortable life in downtown Chicago. I'd had relationships before, but nothing serious, nothing that made me think about marriage or family. I was focused on my career, content with my bachelor lifestyle, honestly didn't think I was missing much. Isabella changed all of that. Within our first 3 dates, she was everything I hadn't known I was looking for in a partner. She was passionate about art and literature, could discuss technology and business with genuine insight, and had traveled the world in ways that made my life seem small and provincial. She spoke 4 languages fluently, could cook incredible meals from memory, and had this laugh that made me want to spend the rest of my life making her happy. But it wasn't just her accomplishments that drew me to her. It was the way she seemed to understand me completely, almost immediately. She could read my moods, knew exactly what to say when I was stressed about work, and had this uncanny ability to anticipate my needs before I even knew I had them. "It's like you can see into my soul," I told her one night as we lay in bed after, making love for what felt like hours. "Maybe I can," she said, tracing patterns on my chest with her finger. "Maybe we're just meant to be together." We moved in together after dating for 6 months, which was faster than I'd ever committed to anyone before. But being with Isabella felt so natural that it seemed silly to maintain separate apartments. She integrated into my life seamlessly, becoming friends with my friends, charming my parents when I brought her home for Christmas, and even helping with my business by offering marketing insights that proved incredibly valuable. My company grew substantially during our first year. Together, partly because Isabella's suggestions helped me identify new markets and improve my client relationships. She had this gift for understanding people's motivations and knowing exactly how to present ideas in ways that resonated with them. "You're my good luck charm," I told her as we celebrated signing my biggest client contract ever. "I'm just happy I can help," she replied. "Your success is my success now. We're a team." I proposed to Isabella on our 2nd anniversary, on the same corner where we'd first met and spilled coffee all over each other. I'd had the ring custom made, incorporating elements from jewelry she'd admired during our travels together. She said yes. I felt like my life was finally complete. Our wedding was perfect. A small ceremony in Napa Valley with our closest friends and family. Isabella looked radiant in her dress, and during our vows, she spoke about how meeting me had changed her entire perspective on what love could be. "You saved me, Michael," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Before I met you, I didn't know what it meant to be truly happy. I can't imagine living without you. The first year of our marriage was blissful. We traveled together, renovated our apartment, talked about starting a family. Isabella left her job as a marketing consultant to focus on what she called supporting our life together, which meant managing our household, helping with my business, and creating the kind of home environment that made me excited to come back. 2. Every day. I was working longer hours as my business continued to expand, and Isabella made that possible by handling everything else in our lives. She managed our finances, maintained our social calendar, and somehow always had dinner ready. And the apartment perfect when I got home, no matter how late I worked. "How do you do it all?" asked her one evening, as we sat on our balcony, watching the sunset over Lake Michigan. "Love makes everything easy," she said, curling up next to me. "When you love someone the way I love you, taking care of them doesn't feel like work." Looking back, there were signs that something wasn't quite right, but I was so happy and so in love that I ignored them or rationalized them away. Isabella never talked much about her past or her family. She said her parents had died in a car accident when she was in college, and that she didn't have any siblings or close relatives. She had few photos from before we met. Claiming she wasn't sentimental about keeping pictures, she also seemed to have an unusual amount of cash available, despite not working. When I asked about it, she said she'd inherited money from her parents and had been living off investments. The amount seemed large for someone her age, but I didn't push because money wasn't something we ever argued about. Another thing that should have concerned me was how perfectly she seemed to fit into my life. She liked all the same movies I did, shared my political views, enjoyed the same restaurants and vacation destinations. At the time, I thought we were just incredibly compatible, soulmates who had found each other against impossible odds. But the most troubling sign, which I only recognized in retrospect, was how isolated I became from my friends and family during our marriage. It wasn't that Isabella explicitly discouraged those relationships, but somehow I found myself spending less and less time with other people. My social world gradually shrunk until it revolved almost entirely around her. The truth began to unravel on a Tuesday morning in our 3rd year of marriage, when I got a call that changed everything. I was at my office when my assistant told me. There was a woman on the phone who claimed to be calling about my wife. I assumed it was someone trying to sell insurance or some kind of service, but something in my assistant's voice made me take the call. "Mr. Davidson," the woman said. "My name is Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. I need to speak with you about your wife, Isabella Martinez." My first thought was that Isabella had been hurt, or that something terrible had happened to her. "Is she okay? Has there been an accident?" "Mr. Davidson, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Agent Chen said. "The woman you know as Isabella Martinez is not who she claims to be. Her real name is Elena Vasquez, and she's wanted by federal law enforcement for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and financial crimes." The words didn't make sense.
8.
"I think you have the wrong person. My wife's name is Isabella, and she's never been involved in anything criminal. Mr. Davidson, I understand this is shocking, but I need you to come to our office immediately. There are things about your wife that you need to know, and there's a possibility that you're in immediate danger." I hung up the phone, convinced that this was some kind of mistake or scam. Isabella was the most honest, loving person I'd ever known. The idea that she was a criminal with a fake identity was absurd, but something about the agent's tone had unsettled me. So I decided to call Isabella and tell her about the strange conversation. Her phone went straight to voicemail, which was unusual because she always answered when I called. I tried calling her several more times over the next hour with no response. And by then, I was starting to feel genuinely worried. I decided to go home early to check on her, thinking maybe she was sick or had some kind of emergency. The apartment was empty when I got home, but everything looked normal. Isabella's clothes were still in the closet. Her jewelry was on the dresser. Her car was in the garage. There was no sign of a struggle or hurried departure. It looked like she had just stepped out for a moment. I called Agent Chen back and agreed to meet with her, thinking that whatever this misunderstanding was about would be cleared up quickly once I explained who Isabella really was. The FBI office in downtown Chicago was intimidating, but Agent Chen was professional and sympathetic. As she led me to a conference room, she spread several files across the table and looked at me with what I thought was pity. Mr. Davidson, I'm going to show you some things that will be very difficult to process, she said. The woman you married is Alina Vasquez, age 29, originally. From Miami, she's part of a sophisticated criminal organization that specializes in long-term romantic fraud, targeting wealthy men. She showed me photographs of Isabella Alina with at least a dozen different men over the past 10 years. In each photo, she looked slightly different, but it was definitely her. Different hair colors, different styles of dress, but the same. Face, the same smile I'd fallen in love with. She's what we call a long con specialist, Agent Chen explained. She spends years building relationships with wealthy targets, gaining their trust, accessing their finances, and then disappearing. With everything she can steal, I stared at the photos, trying to process what I was seeing. But we've been married for over 2 years. She lives with me, she helps with my business, misstating you, Mr. Davidson, learning your habits, your weaknesses, your financial situation. These women are incredibly skilled at psychological manipulation. They become whatever their targets need them to be. Agent Chen showed me more files documenting Elena's criminal history. She had used at least 8 different identities over the past decade, targeting successful men in different cities across the country. The pattern was always the same. Meet through an apparently accidental encounter, develop an intense romantic relationship, get married, gain access to finances, then disappear without warning. Her previous victims lost an average of $400,000. Each Agent Chen told me. One man lost over $1 million in his business. Another one had a complete psychological breakdown and had to be hospitalized. But that doesn't make sense, I protested. Isabella doesn't have access to my business accounts. Our personal accounts are joint, but there's not enough money there to make this kind of elaborate scheme worthwhile. Agent Chen looked uncomfortable. Mr. Davidson, when was the last time you checked your business accounts? I felt my stomach drop. I pulled out my phone and logged into my business banking app, something I did routinely several times a week. The main operating account, which should have had about $180,000 in it, showed a balance of $347. That's impossible, I said, refreshing the page. There must be some kind of error. But as I checked account after account, I discovered that they had all been systematically drained over the past 3 months. My business accounts, my personal savings, my investment accounts, everything was gone. Over $600,000 had been transferred out in small increments, amounts carefully calculated to stay below the thresholds that would trigger automatic fraud alerts. You had to have access to all your passwords and account information, Agent Chen said. These transfers were made using your legitimate login credentials, which is why they weren't flagged as suspicious activity. I realized with horror that Isabella had watched me log into my accounts hundreds of times over the past 2 years. She'd seen me type passwords, had access to my computer and phone, could have easily copied all the information she needed to systematically rob me blind. Where is she now? I asked. Don't know, Agent Chen admitted. She's been very careful to cover her tracks. But Mr. Davidson, there's something else you need to know. The woman you married as Isabella Martinez doesn't legally exist. The identity is completely fabricated. Your marriage isn't valid, which means you have no legal protections as her spouse. I felt like my entire world was collapsing. The woman I'd loved for 3 years, the person I'd trusted with my life and my heart, was a criminal who had been systematically destroying me while pretending to love me. How long have you been tracking her? I asked. About 6 months, Agent. Chen said, we've been building a case based on complaints from her previous victims. We were close to arresting her, but she must have realized we were closing in. I went home that evening to an apartment that felt like a crime scene. Everything Isabella had touched, every memory we'd created together, was tainted by the knowledge that none of it had been real. She'd been performing a role, studying me like a specimen, planning my destruction while I fell deeper in love with her. The worst part was going through our belongings and realizing how little evidence there was of Isabella's real identity. The photos she claimed were from her childhood were stock images I found online. The stories she'd told about her past were fabricated. Even her emotional reactions, the tears she'd shed during our wedding vows, had been part of an elaborate performance. I found a hidden compartment in her jewelry, box containing multiple IDs with different names, and a burner phone with text messages to someone named Carlos about finishing the Chicago job and moving to the next target. Over the next several weeks, as I worked with the FBI to track Isabella, Alina, and tried to recover my stolen money, I learned more about the criminal organization she was part of. They were a sophisticated network of con artists who specialized in long-term romantic fraud, targeting successful men who were lonely or relationship-naive. Alina was one of their top performers, capable of maintaining fake relationships for years while systematically draining her victims' resources. She had been trained in psychology, acting, and financial manipulation. Her ability to become the perfect woman for each target wasn't natural. Charisma, it was a professional skill she'd developed over years of practice. The investigation revealed that she had been reporting on me regularly to her handlers, sending detailed psychological profiles that helped them plan the most effective ways to manipulate me. They knew about my relationship with my parents, my insecurities about commitment, my business vulnerabilities, everything. She was essentially a spy, Agent Chen explained. Except instead of stealing government secrets, she was stealing your life. The financial damage was devastating, but the psychological impact was worse. I couldn't trust my own judgment about people anymore. Every interaction felt potentially dangerous. Every new relationship suspect. If I could be so completely fooled by someone I'd lived with for 3 years, how could I ever trust anyone again? My business collapsed within 6 months. Without the stolen capital, I couldn't meet my obligations to clients or pay my employees. The scandal of being defrauded by my own wife made it difficult to attract new clients, and I eventually had to declare bankruptcy. I also struggled with depression and anxiety that made it difficult to function normally. I kept replaying conversations with Isabella, looking for signs I'd missed, clues that should have told me she was lying. The fact that I could find so few warning signs made it worse, not better. The breakthrough in the case came 8 months after Isabella disappeared, when one of her previous victims recognized her photo in a news story about financial fraud. He contacted the FBI with information about seeing her in Las Vegas, where she was apparently working on her next target. Alina was arrested at a high-end restaurant while on a date with a wealthy real estate developer who had no idea he was being set up for the same treatment she'd given me. When federal agents approached their table, she tried to run but was quickly apprehended. I was asked to testify at her trial, which was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do. Seeing Alina in handcuffs, looking nothing like the loving wife I'd thought I knew, was surreal. She stared at me throughout my testimony with no emotion whatsoever, like I was a stranger she'd never met. During her testimony, Alina showed no remorse for what she'd done to me or her other victims. She claimed she was just good at relationships, and that her victims had gotten what they paid for in terms of companionship and affection, even if the relationships weren't permanent. I made Mr. Davidson happy for 3 years, she said when asked about our marriage. I was a good wife to him. The fact that our relationship had a business component doesn't negate the genuine care I provided. Her lawyer tried to portray her as a victim of circumstance who had been forced into criminal activity by an abusive criminal organization, but the evidence showed that Alina had been a willing and enthusiastic participant in the fraud scheme. One of their most successful operators. She was ultimately sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, identity theft, and racketeering. The judge noted during sentencing that her crimes had caused profound psychological harm to her victims beyond just the financial losses. I recovered about $180,000 of my stolen money through asset forfeiture when Alina's assets were seized, but most of it was gone forever. The criminal organization had sophisticated money laundering operations that made it nearly impossible to trace where the funds had gone. More importantly, I slowly began to rebuild my sense of self and my ability to trust other people. It took 2 years of therapy and the support of friends and family who stuck with me through the worst period of my life. I eventually started a new business, this time in cybersecurity consulting, partly because my experience as a fraud victim gave me unique insights into how criminals exploit technology to steal people's identities and money. The work felt meaningful, in a way my previous career never had, and I was helping protect other people from the kind of devastation I'd experienced. 5 years after Elena's arrest, I met Maria, a psychologist who specialized in helping fraud victims recover from trauma. We met at a conference where I was speaking about cybersecurity, and she approached me afterward to compliment my presentation. "I work with people who've been through experiences similar to yours," she told me. "It takes tremendous courage to turn that kind of trauma into something that helps others." Maria was everything Elena had pretended to be: genuinely caring, intellectually curious, emotionally honest. But more importantly, she understood the psychological impact of being deceived by someone you love. And she never made me feel foolish or naive for having been victimized. Our relationship developed slowly, with both of us being careful to maintain our independence and individual identities. Maria encouraged me to trust my instincts again, while also helping me develop better skills for recognizing manipulation and deception. We were married 2 years ago, and this time I knew the difference between genuine love and professional manipulation. Maria doesn't try to be perfect or to anticipate my every need. She has her own opinions, her own goals, her own flaws and strengths. She's real in a way that Elena never was. Today, I run a successful cybersecurity firm that helps individuals and small businesses protect themselves from fraud. I also volunteer with victim advocacy organizations, helping people who've been targeted by romance scams and financial fraud. The work is personally meaningful because I understand what my clients are going through in ways that someone who hasn't been victimized never could. I know the shame of realizing you've been completely fooled by someone you trusted. I know the fear of never being able to trust your own judgment again. I know the financial devastation and the psychological trauma that comes from having your entire life turned upside down by someone who claimed to love you. But I also know that recovery is possible. You can rebuild your life after being destroyed by someone's deception, and that the experience can ultimately make you stronger and more empathetic if you're willing to do the work of healing. Elena is scheduled to be released from prison next year. I don't know if she'll contact me or try to cause more problems in my life, but I'm not afraid of her anymore. She was skilled at manipulation and deception, but she was only successful because I was vulnerable to the particular kind of fantasy she was selling. Not that vulnerable anymore. I know the difference between love and manipulation, between genuine intimacy and professional performance. I've built a life based on reality rather than fantasy, surrounded by people who know and accept the real me rather than a version of myself designed to make them happy. The woman who destroyed my life by pretending to love me ultimately taught me what real love actually looks like. It's not perfect compatibility or effortless understanding. It's not someone who anticipates your every need or who seems too good. To be true, real love is messy and complicated and sometimes difficult. It's built on genuine knowledge of each other's flaws and strengths, not on carefully constructed personas designed to manipulate. It's about two imperfect people choosing to build something together, not about one person performing a role designed to destroy the other. Elena was the perfect wife, but she was perfect in all the wrong ways. She was everything I thought I wanted in a partner, which should have been the first warning sign that something wasn't right. My name is Michael Davidson, and I survived being married to a professional con artist who stole my money, destroyed my business, and nearly broke my spirit. But I also discovered that being deceived by someone who pretends to love you can teach you more about genuine love than any amount of happiness with the right person ever could. Sometimes the worst betrayal leads to the most authentic life. Not because the betrayal was good, but because surviving it forces you to distinguish between what's real and what's performance, between what's genuine and what's too perfect to be true.